Hello, everyone, and welcome to 10 Minutes to a Better Building. I'm your host today, Tyler Kern. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the show. Today, we are talking about the supply chain. Now, obviously, over the last year and a half, the supply chain has had some issues, some challenges. I think many people are aware of that. And today, we're going to dive into how that has affected the HVAC industry. And Mike is going to tell us a little bit more about how Boland has coped with these particular difficulties over the last year and a half. So, joining me today is Mike Alexis, account executive at Boland. Mike, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm pumped to have you on, and obviously this is a topic that's relevant to so many people right now, Mike. So start us off just by talking about how the supply chain challenges we're seeing around the world have had an impact on HVAC.
Well, like you said, Tyler, the HVAC industry right now is dealing with the same issues that virtually every other industry is facing at this moment,
Hmm.
from material shortages to labor shortages in warehouse and in the trucking industry. It's even been impacted by the semiconductor chip that's pretty much crippled the auto industry right now. Some of the electronic pieces and HVAC equipment requires these chips to function, so that's delayed some of that stuff. So to kind of answer your question, I wouldn't say there's any one particular issue that makes our industry unique, other than the fact that we're just dealing with the same struggles that everybody else is faced with, and we're just trying to adapt and deal with each issue as best we can.
Have you noticed a difference between maybe how this has affected residential versus commercial type situations, or is it pretty much the same across the board for HVAC?
It's kind of the same across the board. Maybe some particular issues, like I think the semiconductor chip shortage has impacted the residential side of things a little bit more. There's a little bit more electronics, like some of the temperature sensors in the thermostats. They need these semiconductor chips and some of the boards and some of the higher end stuff. And on the commercial side of things, I'd say the warehouse labor shortages and some of the trucking stuff has kind of impacted us a little bit more. So yeah, but again, there are some of the same issues that we're all kind of facing at the same time there.
Absolutely. So, from your perspective at Boland, how is Boland really tackling these challenges and meeting them, and then ensuring that your customers' needs are still met?
So for us, I think the best way to handle these challenges is to try to get out in front of any of these issues. People have so much information at their fingertips these days. So upfront communication is very important. People want transparency, they want information, they want solutions, and quite frankly, they want honesty. So making sure there's just no big surprises, from the beginning of an order to the end of an order is pretty key. There's going to be hurdles that pop up all the time with certain orders, but just making sure you have answers for your customers, even if they aren't exactly the answers that your customer want to hear. Just taking the time to make a phone call goes a long way. And I believe Jerry Scanlon on one of his interviews with Jim, said, just making a phone call goes a long way to making sure that your relationship with your customer is there, and they appreciate that.
Yeah, there really is something to be said for not hiding behind anything, right? And just being upfront and honest about, hey, here's the situation. We're doing our best to fix it, and yeah, not trying to sugarcoat things or to hide behind excuses, whatever, but just being upfront and honest. I think people appreciate that these days, rather than being kept in the dark, right?
Absolutely. I mean, people's everyday lives right now have been affected by supply chain issues.
Hmm.
So being transparent, upfront, honest, and again, trying to find solutions when there might not be one is key. Just to making sure that you're working for them to try to get them the product they need as fast as they can, as fast as we can.
And I guess part of me also wonders if you're able to build strong relationships with customers up front, that it helps kind of weather challenges like this, right? If you've always been honest, always been good at communicating with clients and with customers, then there's a little bit more understanding when stuff like this happens. But if you haven't been proactive about keeping in touch, communicating well, and being upfront and honest with customers, then it's a little bit harder because you don't have that trust factor there. And I think that that's something that's central to what Boland does, is making sure that you always have those strong relationships with customers, so that when stuff like this comes around, rather than being reactive, you're being proactive about it.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Just being upfront, honest, and again, trying to find a solution when maybe there isn't one. It gives you the benefit of the doubt when problems do that are out of your control, pop up, they are definitely more understanding if you are upfront at the very beginning and you have that strong relationship with your customer.
That's a really good point. So, throughout this time, Mike, have there been other options that you've been able to provide sometimes, to maybe get around some of the supply chain issues that you've seen? Like, if something isn't available, can you provide something else? Or, that sort of thing. Have you had those types of conversations where you say, "Can't give you this, but we can maybe go this direction and try something different"?
Absolutely. At Bold Supply, we've got an array of different products, throughout all three locations. So, even if we don't have, maybe we don't have something the customer is particularly looking for, maybe we have something equivalent in stock. For example, some of the train OEM parts and pieces can be a little bit trickier because some of those pieces are very specific to a unit. But for example, if a customer has a bad fan motor, we try to take a look at the specs to see if we can match it up with something from one of our other vendors. Going back to what we just talked about, trying to find a positive solution is important for all interactions. And another example, at Bold Supply, we can find a lot of parts and pieces for some of our other major competitors too. I've had a few situations where customers reached out to me because they can't get a certain part for another manufacturer's unit, and we've been able to find it, and sometimes at a cheaper price. So no matter how big or small the transaction is, finding a positive solution and a positive outcome for our customer and essentially their customer is super important.
And sometimes that's going to require creativity. But when you have the expertise and the level of knowledge of the industry that Boland has, you're able to provide those creative solutions, right?
Absolutely. And, I've been in the supply industry now for a while, from, dating back from my time on the counter at Gaithersburg to now an account executive, outside. You break it down. A fan motor is a fan motor, whether it's a train unit or a carrier unit. If you can match it up and it can work for your customer, then that's how you got to break it down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Mike, as we start to wrap up our conversation here today, I want to give you the opportunity to give us any final thoughts you have, any conclusions that you want the audience to walk away with here today. So the floor is yours, Mike. Any final thoughts, anything you want our listeners to know as they walk away having listened to this episode today?
Well, I think everybody's just trying to navigate through this new world as best they can. And not everything everybody's going to try is going to work out. But I keep going back to this. Honest conversations about the challenges we are all facing is best practice these days. Everybody's everyday lives have been impacted by, the supply chain issues that we're facing right now. For example, I ordered one of those Uni pizza ovens back in June, and it didn't show up until 2 weeks ago. So my summer of pizza making has now turned into the fall of pizza making.
Well, good news for you. Every season is good season for pizza making. So it'll be all right. But no, you're right. It takes a lot of honesty and understanding, I think, these days, because everyone's struggling with supply chain issues in one way or another. And so yeah, that's just the world we live in at this moment here in 2021. Mike Alexis, account executive at Boland. Mike, thank you so much for joining me here for the podcast and talking us through some of these issues.
Thank you, Tyler. And just to close it out, just again, keep adapting to those problems, get out in front of them, stay positive and find positive outcomes for everything.
There we go. Excellent, excellent advice from Mike there. And everyone, thank you for tuning into this episode of 10 Minutes to a Better Building, a podcast from Boland. Of course, we have a lot of episodes of the podcast. So if you have any questions about how to make your building better, I can almost guarantee you we have a podcast episode on it. So go back, check out the feed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or by visiting Boland's website as well to stay up to date with the latest in news and information from Boland. And stay tuned. We'll be back soon with new episodes of the show. But for this one, for my guest today, Mike Alexis, I've been your host, Tyler Kern. Thanks for joining us.